What if 5 minutes a day could completely change the direction of your life? Not next year, not someday, but starting today, because the greatest threat to your future isn't failure, it's drifting. And if you watch this every single day, you won't drift, you'll grow. Every single day, whether you realize it or not, you are becoming something. You are not standing still. You are not neutral. You are moving in a direction shaped quietly and consistently by what holds your attention. Most people think destiny is determined by big moments, major decisions, or once in a lifetime opportunities, but the truth is far more subtle and far more confronting. Destiny is shaped by daily focus. What you look at the most eventually leads you where you will go. What you think about the most eventually becomes what you believe. And what you believe long enough eventually becomes how you live. Focus is powerful because it works even when you are not paying attention to it. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly become discouraged, distracted, spiritually dry, or purposeless. You slowly drift there because your focus has been pulled away little by little. A few minutes here, a few thoughts there, a few unchecked habits repeated day after day. No one plans to lose their passion. No one plans to grow distant from God. No one plans to wake up years later wondering how they became someone they never intended to be. It happens because focus was misplaced long before the outcome was visible. Your focus is training your mind. It is shaping your expectations. It is defining your sense of what is normal. If every day your attention is dominated by fear, outrage, comparison, and noise, your mind learns to live in chaos. Your heart learns to expect disappointment. Your faith slowly weakens, not because God moved, but because your focus did. What you focus on expands. What you focus on gains influence. What you focus on begins to feel unavoidable and overwhelming, even if it is not. The reason daily focus matters so much is because the human brain is not designed to be passive. It is constantly forming pathways. Repetition strengthens those pathways. What you rehearse in your mind becomes easier to return to. That is why negative thinking feels automatic after a while. That is why fear shows up without invitation. That is why doubt can sound like your own voice. You didn't choose those thoughts once. You chose them repeatedly through what you allowed to hold your attention. This is why transformation does not begin with willpower. It begins with focus. You don't change your life by trying harder in one dramatic moment. You change your life by changing what you look at, listen to, think about, and return to every single day. Direction always comes before destination. If your focus is off, your direction will be off, even if your intentions are good. Many people are sincere, but sincerity without focus still leads to drift. You can love God and still be distracted. You can want purpose and still live scattered. You can desire growth and still remain stuck, because desire alone does not shape destiny. Focus does. What you consistently give your attention to becomes the loudest voice in your life. And the loudest voice eventually becomes the deciding voice. That is why watching something daily, hearing truth daily, renewing your mind daily is not excessive, it is essential. The world is discipling you every day. Culture is shaping you every day. Fear-based headlines, comparison-driven platforms, and endless distractions are constantly training your mind, whether you consent or not. If you are not intentional about what you focus on, something else will be intentional for you. Focus determines not only where you go, but how you see where you are. Two people can walk through the same season and experience it completely differently based on focus. One sees obstacles, the other sees opportunity. One sees delay, the other sees preparation. One sees abandonment, the other sees God working behind the scenes. The difference is not circumstances. The difference is focus. When your focus is on what you lack, gratitude disappears. When your focus is on what others have, contentment fades. When your focus is on worst-case scenarios, peace becomes impossible. But when your focus is on truth, on purpose, on God's promises, your internal world changes even if your external circumstances do not. You cannot always control what happens to you, but you can control what you focus on within you. Daily focus is especially important because emotions are unreliable leaders. If you wait to feel inspired before you focus on what matters, you will rarely do it. Focus is a decision you make before feelings catch up. You choose what deserves your attention. You choose what gets the first word in your day. You choose what shapes your inner dialogue. And those choices compound over time. Think about it this way. The life you are living today is largely the result of what you focused on yesterday. The habits you have now were once decisions you repeated. The beliefs you carry now were once thoughts you entertained. The spiritual condition you experience now was shaped by what you return to consistently, not occasionally. Destiny is not mysterious when you trace it backward. It is predictable when you follow the trail of focus. This is why small, daily shifts in focus are so powerful. You don't need to overhaul your entire life in one moment. You need to redirect your attention consistently. A few minutes of truth each day can interrupt years of negative conditioning. A daily reminder of purpose can realign a drifting heart. A daily focus on God's presence can anchor you in seasons of uncertainty. The enemy of your destiny is not always temptation. Often it is distraction. You don't lose focus all at once. You lose it gradually by allowing urgent things to replace important things, by allowing noise to replace stillness, by allowing convenience to replace conviction. And once focus is gone, discipline weakens, clarity fades, and direction becomes blurred. But the opposite is also true. When focus is restored, strength returns. When focus is clarified, priorities realign. When focus is anchored, peace increases. You become harder to shake because your mind is not constantly pulled in 100 directions. You begin to live intentionally rather than reactively. You stop being driven by the moment and start being guided by purpose. Daily focus also determines spiritual sensitivity. When your attention is scattered, it becomes harder to recognize God's voice, not because you stopped speaking, but because you stopped listening. Focus creates space for awareness. It slows you down enough to notice what matters. It tunes your heart to recognize conviction, guidance, and peace. Without focus, spiritual life becomes shallow and reactive rather than deep and anchored. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A single powerful moment of focus cannot compete with thousands of distracted ones. Destiny is shaped in the quiet repetition of ordinary days. When you choose day after day to focus on what is true, what is good, what is life-giving, you are quietly building a future you may not yet see, but will eventually live in. Daily focus determines what you normalize. If chaos is what you constantly consume, chaos begins to feel normal. If faith is what you consistently feed on, faith begins to feel natural. What once felt difficult becomes familiar. What once required effort becomes instinct. This is how lives change without dramatic announcements. This is how growth happens quietly, steadily, faithfully. You don't wake up one day accidentally strong in faith. You wake up strong because you focused on truth when it was easier to scroll, because you chose renewal when it was easier to numb, because you chose alignment when it was easier to drift. Focus is the unseen force behind visible outcomes. If you want to know where your life is headed, don't look at your goals. Look at your focus. Look at what dominates your attention. Look at what you return to when no one is watching. Look at what shapes your thoughts when your guard is down. That is the direction your life is moving, whether you intend it or not. Changing your focus is not about restriction. It is about freedom. When you choose what holds your attention, you take back control of your inner world. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start becoming a steward of your mind. You begin to live with clarity rather than confusion, with intention rather than impulse, with faith rather than fear. Daily focus determines destiny because daily focus determines identity. You become what you behold. You become what you rehearse. You become what you consistently give your attention to, and over time, those small, quiet choices accumulate into a life that reflects them. No one wakes up one day and accidentally lives a life of purpose, clarity, and discipline. A better life is never the result of chance, luck, or good intentions alone. It is always the result of decisions made consistently over time. Drift is the natural default of life. If you do nothing, if you choose nothing, if you decide nothing, life will still move, but it will move you somewhere you did not plan to go. A better life does not happen automatically because growth is not accidental. Growth is intentional. Drifting feels harmless at first. It rarely looks dangerous in the beginning. Drift feels like postponing a decision, delaying obedience, avoiding discomfort, or telling yourself you will deal with it later. Drift whispers that there is no urgency, that you have more time, that tomorrow will be better suited for change. Drift never demands anything from you, which is why it feels safe. But drift is deceptive because it always moves you away from where you want to be, even when you cannot feel it happening. When you drift, you don't notice distance right away. A boat untied from the dock does not suddenly disappear. It moves slowly, quietly, inch by inch. The danger is not the speed, it is the direction. By the time you realize how far you have drifted, returning requires far more effort than staying anchored would have. The same is true in life. People rarely end up far from God, far from purpose, or far from who they wanted to become overnight. They drift there through a series of unmade decisions. A better life requires decisions because decisions create direction. Direction gives shape to your days. Direction determines what you say yes to and, just as importantly, what you say no to. Without decisions, you live reactively. You respond to whatever is loudest, closest, or easiest in the moment. That kind of life may feel flexible, but it is actually fragile because it is controlled by circumstances instead of convictions. Many people confuse wanting with deciding. They want better relationships, stronger faith, clearer purpose, healthier habits, and deeper peace. Wanting feels sincere, but wanting without deciding changes nothing. Decisions are costly because they require commitment. Decisions close doors. Decisions force you to act in alignment with what you say you value, even when it is uncomfortable. That is why so many people stay stuck in wanting. Wanting feels safe. Deciding feels risky. When you decide, you take responsibility. You stop blaming your past, your upbringing, your circumstances, or other people for the direction of your life. Decisions shift the focus from what happened to you to what you will do with what happened. That shift is uncomfortable, but it is also empowering. You may not control everything that has shaped you, but you do control the decisions that shape what comes next. A better life begins with deciding what kind of person you will be before deciding what you will do. Identity-driven decisions are far more powerful than emotion-driven ones. When you decide who you are, your actions begin to follow that decision. You don't wait to feel disciplined to act disciplined. You act disciplined because you have decided that is who you are becoming. You don't wait to feel faithful to pursue God. You pursue God because you have decided that faith will define your life. Drift is passive. Decisions are active. Drift requires no energy. Decisions require courage. That is why drift is so common and intentional living is so rare. Most people live by default because default living demands less from them in the moment. But what demands less now often costs more later. The pain of discipline is always less than the pain of regret, but discipline requires a decision before the results are visible. One of the reasons people resist deciding is because decisions feel permanent. People fear making the wrong choice, so they make no choice at all. But indecision is still a decision. Choosing not to decide is choosing to drift. And drift always has a destination. Even if you did not choose it consciously, life rewards clarity. When you decide, your energy aligns. Your priorities sharpen. Your actions gain consistency. Deciding into a better life does not mean you have everything figured out. It means you have chosen a direction. You don't need a detailed map, you need a compass. Decisions act as that compass. They keep pulling you back when distractions try to move you off course. They remind you who you are and what matters when emotions fluctuate and circumstances change. A decided life is not an easy life, but it is a grounded one. When challenges come, and they will, decisions give you something solid to stand on. You are not constantly reevaluating who you are or what you believe based on how you feel that day. You have already decided. That stability creates resilience. You bend, but you do not break because your life is anchored to intentional choices rather than temporary emotions. Many people wait for confidence before they decide, but confidence is not the starting point. Confidence is the byproduct of keeping decisions. Each time you honor a decision, you strengthen trust in yourself. Each time you follow through, even when it is hard, your confidence grows. Drift erodes confidence because it trains you to break promises to yourself. Decisions restore confidence because they train you to keep them. A better life is built on a series of decided moments that no one applauds. You decide to get up when it would be easier to stay in bed. You decide to pray when it would be easier to distract yourself. You decide to speak truth when silence would be more comfortable. You decide to walk away from what is easy to pursue what is right. These decisions rarely feel dramatic, but they are deeply formative. Decisions also reveal values. You may say you value growth, but your decisions reveal what you actually prioritize. You may say faith matters, but your decisions show where God fits into your daily life. Drift allows you to claim values without living them. Decisions force alignment. They expose gaps between what you say and what you do, not to shame you, but to invite change. A decided life does not eliminate temptation or struggle, but it does simplify choices. When you have already decided your direction, many options lose their appeal. You stop debating what you have already resolved. You conserve mental and emotional energy because you are not constantly negotiating with yourself. That clarity creates peace, not because life is easier, but because it is simpler. Deciding into a better life often starts with uncomfortable honesty. You have to admit where drift has taken you. You have to acknowledge habits that no longer serve you, patterns that are pulling you away from who you want to be, and compromises you have normalized. That honesty can sting, but it is the doorway to freedom. You cannot decide into a better life while pretending nothing needs to change. The power of a decision is not in the moment it is made, but in the moments that follow. A single decision can set a new trajectory, but it must be reinforced daily. Decisions are not one-time events. They are commitments you renew through action. Each day you live in alignment with your decisions, you move a little further away from drift and a little closer to purpose. A better life is not about perfection. You will stumble, you will fail, You will have days where drift tries to pull you back. Deciding does not mean you never fall. It means you always get back up, facing the right direction. It means you refuse to let a bad day become a bad life. It means you choose progress over excuses and growth over comfort. When you decide, you interrupt drift. You draw a line in the sand and say, this is the direction my life will move, regardless of how I feel, regardless of how long it takes, regardless of how imperfect the process is. That decision may not change everything immediately, but it changes everything eventually. You don't drift into a better life because drift never leads upward. You decide into a better life because decisions create movement, clarity, and momentum. Every intentional choice is a step toward the life you want to live, the person you want to become, and the future you want to stand in. Most people underestimate the power of what they do consistently because they overvalue what they do occasionally. We live in a culture that celebrates big moments, dramatic breakthroughs, and overnight success, yet real transformation almost never happens that way. Real change is quiet. It is slow. It is often invisible in the beginning. Small daily disciplines do not look impressive at first, but they are doing more than you realize beneath the surface. They are shaping your character, training your mind, and building a future that will eventually become impossible to ignore. Daily disciplines work because life is shaped more by rhythm than by intensity. What you repeat becomes what you rely on. What you practice becomes what you perform. What you do every day eventually becomes part of who you are. This is why people who experience lasting growth rarely point to one defining moment as the reason for their transformation. They point to patterns, they point to habits, they point to daily decisions that seemed insignificant at the time, but proved powerful over the long term. Small disciplines matter because they compound. The effect of compounding is not dramatic in the beginning. In fact, it can feel discouraging because effort does not immediately produce visible results. You pray consistently, but still feel uncertain. You show up faithfully, but still feel unnoticed. You choose discipline over comfort, but still feel tired. The temptation in those moments is to quit, assuming nothing is happening. But discipline is not designed to impress you quickly. It is designed to change you deeply. Every small discipline is a vote for the person you are becoming. Each time you choose what is right instead of what is easy, you reinforce an identity. You may not feel stronger in the moment, but you are becoming stronger. You may not feel more disciplined yet, but you are training discipline. You may not feel closer to God immediately, but you are positioning your heart to recognize His presence. The change is happening even when you cannot see it. The reason small daily disciplines are so effective is because they bypass resistance. Big changes demand big emotional energy. They feel overwhelming, so we postpone them. Small disciplines feel manageable. They lower the barrier to consistency. You don't have to feel motivated to take a small step. You just have to be willing. Over time, willingness becomes habit, and habit becomes lifestyle. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction, but discipline is actually a form of freedom. It frees you from being controlled by your impulses, moods, and circumstances. When you live without discipline, you are constantly reacting. When you live with discipline, you are intentionally responding. Small daily disciplines create stability in a world that constantly pulls you toward chaos. Spiritual growth follows the same principle. You do not become spiritually strong through occasional moments of intensity. You grow through daily connection. Short prayers offered consistently shape faith more than long prayers offered occasionally. Daily exposure to truth slowly rewires the way you think. Faith grows not through pressure, but through presence. When you show up every day, Even imperfectly, you create space for God to work in ways you may not recognize at first. One of the biggest challenges with daily disciplines is that they require faith. You have to believe that what you are doing today matters, even when you cannot see results tomorrow. You have to trust the process before you trust the outcome. This kind of faith is uncomfortable because it requires patience. But patience is not passive. Patience is active trust. It is choosing to stay consistent when quitting would be easier. Small daily disciplines also protect you from burnout. Big, unsustainable efforts often lead to exhaustion and disappointment. People push hard for a short season and then collapse, wondering why they cannot maintain progress. Sustainable change is built on rhythms you can carry through every season of life. Small disciplines fit into ordinary days. They do not require perfect conditions. They adapt to busy schedules, emotional ups and downs, and unexpected challenges. Consistency is more powerful than intensity because consistency builds trust. When you consistently show up for yourself, you begin to trust your own commitments. That trust strengthens your confidence. You stop seeing yourself as someone who always starts and never finishes. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through. That shift in identity changes the way you approach everything else in life. Daily disciplines also create momentum. Momentum does not come from doing something once, it comes from doing something again. Each repeated action makes the next one easier. Resistance decreases as repetition increases. What once required effort becomes familiar. What once felt forced becomes natural. Momentum carries you forward even on days when motivation is low. The danger is not that small disciplines do not work. The danger is that they work so quietly that people stop believing in them. They underestimate the power of showing up. They assume that if they cannot see progress, there is no progress. But growth often happens underground before it ever appears above the surface. Roots grow before fruit appears. Strength develops before results are visible. Daily disciplines also shape your environment. When you choose intentional habits, you begin to structure your life in a way that supports growth. You create spaces that reinforce focus. You develop routines that reduce decision fatigue. You eliminate friction that once made discipline feel difficult. Over time, your environment begins to work for you rather than against you. The impact of small disciplines is especially evident over long periods of time. A single day of discipline may not feel significant, but years of discipline create a life of depth, clarity, and resilience. Small compromises repeated over time lead to regret. Small disciplines repeated over time lead to strength. The difference between where people end up is rarely talent or opportunity. It is consistency. Discipline does not eliminate struggle, but it changes how you face it. When challenges arise, disciplined people have patterns to fall back on. They do not have to invent solutions in the middle of stress. Their habits carry them when emotions are unstable. Discipline becomes an anchor. It holds you steady when circumstances try to pull you off course. Small daily disciplines also train you to value progress over perfection. You learn that showing up imperfectly is better than waiting to show up perfectly. This mindset frees you from procrastination and fear. You stop delaying growth because conditions are not ideal. You start growing where you are with what you have. Over time, discipline reshapes your desires. At first, discipline may feel forced because it is not yet aligned with what you want. But as you practice it, your desires begin to change. You start wanting what once felt difficult. You begin to crave clarity, peace, and purpose more than comfort and distraction. Discipline trains your heart, not just your behavior. Long-term change is rarely the result of dramatic decisions. It is the result of daily faithfulness. It is built through repetition, not reaction. Through commitment, not convenience. Small daily disciplines may not change your life overnight, but they will change the direction of your life. And direction sustained over time determines destination. When you commit to small disciplines, you are choosing to invest in a future version of yourself that you may not yet recognize. You are planting seeds you may not harvest immediately. You are trusting that what feels ordinary today will become extraordinary over time. That trust is what separates those who change temporarily from those who change permanently. Small daily disciplines are powerful because they align your actions with your values day after day. They close the gap between who you are and who you want to become. They turn intentions into habits and habits into identity. Over time, the accumulation of those small, faithful choices creates a life that looks different not because of one big moment, but because of thousands of quiet ones. Most people believe their thoughts are harmless because they assume thoughts are passive. They think thoughts simply appear, pass through, and disappear without consequence. But thoughts are not neutral. Every thought you allow to stay is shaping you. Every repeated thought is training your mind to think that way again. Your thoughts are not just informing you about the world around you, they are forming the world within you. They are building patterns, expectations, and beliefs that quietly influence how you live. The mind is always learning. It does not stop training just because you are unaware of the process. Each time you think a thought, your brain strengthens a neural pathway. The more often that thought appears, the easier it becomes for your mind to return to it. Over time, what started as a passing idea becomes a familiar pattern. What was once a suggestion becomes a reflex. This is why certain thoughts show up automatically. They have been practiced. Many people live trapped in thought patterns they never consciously chose. They assume those thoughts are simply part of who they are. Negative self-talk, fear-based assumptions, and limiting beliefs feel natural because they are familiar, not because they are true. Repetition has trained the mind to return to them. The mind does not distinguish between helpful thoughts and harmful ones. It strengthens whatever you repeat. This is why unmanaged thoughts can quietly sabotage your life. You may say you want growth, but if your thoughts constantly tell you that you are not capable, not qualified, or not worthy, your actions will eventually align with those thoughts. Thoughts shape behavior before behavior becomes visible. Long before someone gives up, withdraws, or settles, they have already rehearsed those outcomes in their mind. Your thoughts are training you how to interpret experiences. Two people can encounter the same challenge and walk away with completely different conclusions. One sees failure and internalizes shame. The other sees feedback and learns. The difference is not intelligence or opportunity. It is the thought patterns they have been trained to run. Your thoughts decide what meaning you assign to what happens to you. This training happens daily, often unconsciously. What you dwell on when your mind is unoccupied matters more than what you think about intentionally for a few minutes. The thoughts you return to when you are tired, stressed, or alone are the ones that have the strongest influence. They reveal what your mind has been trained to default to. That default shapes your emotional responses and your decisions. The danger of unhealthy thought patterns is that they rarely announce themselves as lies. They sound reasonable. They sound familiar. They sound like your own voice. Thoughts like this will never change. This is just how I am, or what's the point, subtly lower expectations and weaken faith. Over time, they become internal narratives that define what you believe is possible. Your thoughts also train your emotional responses. Anxiety is often the result of repeatedly rehearsing worst-case scenarios. Fear grows stronger when you mentally practice danger more than trust. Discouragement deepens when you replay failures more than faithfulness. The mind responds emotionally to what it is fed repeatedly. You cannot consistently think in one direction and feel in another. Spiritual life is deeply affected by thought training. You can believe in God and still think in ways that contradict His truth. You can trust God in theory while mentally preparing for disappointment. When your thoughts are not aligned with truth, faith remains shallow. Not because God is distant, but because your mind is not trained to rest in His promises. The good news is that thoughts can be retrained. The mind is flexible. It can learn new patterns at any stage of life, but retraining requires intention. You cannot change your thoughts by accident. You must interrupt old patterns and replace them with new ones. This does not happen by suppressing thoughts, but by redirecting them. Replacing unhealthy thoughts begins with awareness. You cannot challenge what you do not notice. Paying attention to your internal dialogue is uncomfortable at first because it exposes patterns you may have normalized. But awareness is not condemnation, it is clarity. When you recognize a thought pattern, you gain the ability to question it instead of obeying it. Thoughts gain power when they go unchallenged. When you accept every thought as truth, your mind becomes a courtroom with no cross-examination. Healthy thinking requires discernment. Not every thought deserves agreement. Not every idea deserves space. Some thoughts must be confronted, not entertained. Your thoughts train you through repetition, but they also train you through emotion. Emotionally charged thoughts leave a stronger imprint. That is why moments of fear, shame, or rejection can shape beliefs so deeply. The mind links emotion with meaning. If you repeatedly experience strong emotion alongside a certain thought, the mind learns to treat that thought as important, even if it is not accurate. This is why truth must be revisited daily. One exposure to truth cannot compete with thousands of repeated lies. The mind needs consistent reinforcement. When you regularly expose yourself to truth, you slowly weaken the influence of destructive thought patterns. New pathways begin to form. What once felt unnatural becomes familiar. What once felt forced becomes instinctive. Thought training also affects how you see others. When your mind is trained in suspicion, you assume the worst. When your mind is trained in grace, you give the benefit of the doubt. When your thoughts are shaped by comparison, you struggle to celebrate others. When your thoughts are shaped by gratitude, you notice what is good. Your inner world determines how you experience the outer world. Your thoughts are training you for future decisions. Long before you face a moment of temptation or challenge, your mind has already been rehearsing possible responses. If your thoughts constantly justify compromise, discipline will feel impossible in the moment. If your thoughts rehearse obedience, courage becomes more accessible when it matters most. This is why waiting until a crisis to change your thinking is ineffective. The mind defaults to its training under pressure. Stress does not create new patterns, it reveals existing ones. The way you think daily is the way you will think when it matters most. Training happens in ordinary moments so that strength is available in extraordinary ones. Thoughts also train your expectations of God. If your mind is repeatedly exposed to disappointment without truth, you may expect God to fail you. If your thoughts constantly question God's goodness, trust erodes quietly. Faith is not just a belief, it is a mental posture. That posture is shaped by repeated thoughts about who God is and how He works. Changing your thoughts does not mean denying reality. It means interpreting reality through truth rather than fear. It means acknowledging difficulty without surrendering hope. It means recognizing challenges without allowing them to define your future. Healthy thinking does not ignore problems. It frames them correctly. Your thoughts are always teaching you something about yourself. They reinforce identity. When you repeatedly think "I can't," you train yourself to avoid effort. When you repeatedly think "I always fail," you train yourself to expect defeat. When you repeatedly think "God is with me," you train yourself to act with confidence and peace. Thought training is not about perfection. You will still have negative thoughts. The difference is what you do with them. Do you dwell on them, or do you direct them? Do you let them define you, or do you filter them? Training is not the absence of wrong thoughts. It is the practice of choosing better ones. Your mind will always move in the direction of its strongest thoughts. Whatever you reinforce will rise. Whatever you ignore will weaken. Over time, thought patterns shape emotional health, spiritual depth, relationships, and decisions. This is why guarding your mind is not optional. It is foundational to growth. Every day, your thoughts are either reinforcing old patterns or building new ones. You are being trained whether you intend to or not. The question is not whether your thoughts are shaping you. The question is what they are shaping you into. Most people are waiting for extraordinary moments while overlooking the power of ordinary days. They believe their future will change when something big happens, when an opportunity appears, when circumstances improve, or when life finally slows down. But God rarely builds extraordinary futures through dramatic interruptions. More often, He works through ordinary routines, normal responsibilities, and repetitive days that feel insignificant in the moment. What feels ordinary to you may be the very place where God is doing His deepest work. Ordinary days can feel frustrating because they lack excitement. They are filled with repetition, responsibilities, and tasks that seem disconnected from purpose. You wake up, go to work, manage relationships, handle stress, and repeat the cycle again. When nothing remarkable seems to happen, it is easy to assume nothing meaningful is happening. But significance is not always visible. God often works quietly, patiently, and progressively, shaping futures in ways that cannot be rushed. Extraordinary futures are rarely built in moments of visibility. They are built in seasons of faithfulness. God values faithfulness far more than flashiness. He pays attention to how you live when no one is applauding, when progress feels slow, and when obedience feels costly. Ordinary days test whether you will remain faithful without immediate reward. They reveal whether your commitment is rooted in purpose or dependent on excitement. Many people underestimate ordinary days because they want instant results. They want progress they can measure, milestones they can celebrate, and change they can announce. But God is not rushed by timelines. He is more concerned with depth and speed. While you are focused on outcomes, God is focused on formation. While you are looking for results, God is building character. And character built slowly lasts longer than success achieved quickly. Ordinary days are where discipline is formed. It is easy to be disciplined when life is exciting or when others are watching. It is much harder to remain disciplined when nothing feels urgent or rewarding. But discipline practiced in ordinary moments becomes strength in extraordinary ones. The habits you build when life is routine become the foundation you stand on when life becomes demanding. God often hides preparation inside repetition. What feels like the same day over and over again is often God strengthening skills, refining attitudes, and deepening trust. Repetition is not punishment, it is training. Muscles grow through repeated stress. Faith grows through repeated obedience. Wisdom grows through repeated decisions aligned with truth. What you repeat is shaping what you will be ready for. Ordinary days also reveal motives. When there is no recognition, no reward, and no excitement, your true reasons for following God become clear. Are you faithful only when it benefits you, or are you faithful because you trust Him? Ordinary days strip away performance and expose authenticity. They teach you to obey without needing constant affirmation. Many people assume God's work will feel dramatic, but most of His work feels subtle. He often works below the surface long before anything appears above it. Just as roots grow underground before fruit appears, spiritual growth happens internally before it becomes visible externally. Ordinary days are where roots deepen. Without deep roots, visible growth cannot be sustained. God also uses ordinary days to teach patience. Patience is not passive waiting, it is active trust. It is choosing to remain faithful when progress feels slow. It is continuing to show up when results are delayed. Ordinary days stretch patience because they force you to trust God's timing instead of demanding your own. That trust shapes maturity. Extraordinary futures require endurance. Endurance is built through consistency, not excitement. Ordinary days train you to keep going when motivation fades. They teach you to rely on commitment rather than emotion. When life eventually presents extraordinary opportunities, endurance determines whether you can handle them without burning out or compromising your values. Ordinary days are also where humility is formed. When you are not in the spotlight, when your work goes unnoticed, when your efforts seem small, humility grows. Humility is essential for handling success without pride. God often delays visible promotion until internal humility is developed. Ordinary days protect you from becoming someone who cannot handle the future God has prepared. God's work in ordinary days is often invisible to others, but it is never wasted. Every prayer whispered in quiet moments matters. Every choice to obey when it is inconvenient matters. Every act of integrity when compromise would be easier matters. These moments may not make headlines, but they shape hearts, and God builds futures from hearts shaped by faithfulness. Ordinary days also shape perspective. When you stop chasing constant excitement, you begin to see meaning in simple moments. Gratitude grows when you learn to appreciate what God is doing now instead of obsessing over what He might do later. Ordinary days teach you to recognize God's presence in routine moments rather than waiting for extraordinary signs. Many people want extraordinary futures without embracing ordinary faithfulness. They want the outcome without the process. But God's pattern has always been process before promise. He prepares people long before He positions them. He refines character long before He releases responsibility. Ordinary days are where preparation happens quietly. God uses ordinary days to teach dependence. When nothing dramatic happens, you learn to rely on God for daily strength rather than occasional miracles. You learn to trust Him for provision, guidance, and peace in everyday situations. That dependence deepens relationship. Faith becomes less about moments and more about movement. Extraordinary futures are often delayed not because God is withholding, but because He is shaping. Timing matters. A future given too early can destroy what it was meant to bless. Ordinary days create maturity, wisdom, and resilience so that when the future arrives, you are ready to steward it well. Ordinary days also confront comparison. When life feels routine, it is tempting to compare your progress to others who seem to be moving faster. But comparison distracts you from your own calling. God's work in your life is personal. Your pace is intentional. Ordinary days teach you to trust your path instead of envying someone else's timeline. God is deeply present in the ordinary. He does not wait for special occasions to work. He is present in conversations, responsibilities, routines, and quiet moments. When you learn to recognize His presence in ordinary days, Your faith becomes more consistent and less dependent on circumstances. Extraordinary futures are not built through constant change, but through consistent obedience. Ordinary days give you countless opportunities to choose obedience in small ways. Those small choices accumulate into a life marked by faithfulness. Over time, what once felt ordinary becomes the foundation of something extraordinary. The future you hope for is being shaped right now, not later. It is being shaped in how you show up today, how you respond to routine challenges, and how you remain faithful when life feels repetitive. Ordinary days are not obstacles to your future. They are the pathway God uses to create it. Motivation is powerful, but it is unreliable. It comes and goes without warning. Some days you wake up energized, focused, and ready to change your life. Other days you wake up tired, distracted, and overwhelmed. If your progress depends on how motivated you feel, your growth will always be unstable. Consistency, not motivation, is what carries you forward when emotions fluctuate and circumstances change. Many people wait to feel motivated before they act, believing motivation is the engine of change. But motivation is more like a spark than a fuel source. It can start something, but it cannot sustain it. Consistency is the steady supply that keeps movement going long after the initial excitement fades. Real transformation does not happen when you feel inspired. It happens when you keep showing up, even when you do not. Motivation is emotional. Consistency is intentional. Emotions respond to circumstances, energy levels, and mood. Intentionality responds to decisions. When life becomes difficult, motivation often disappears because emotions are overwhelmed. Consistency remains because it is anchored in commitment rather than feeling. This is why disciplined people continue growing in hard seasons, while motivated people often stall. Relying on motivation creates a cycle of starting and stopping. You begin strong, make progress, then slow down when motivation fades. Each time this happens, frustration grows. Over time, you begin to doubt your ability to change. Consistency breaks that cycle by removing the requirement to feel ready. You act because it is who you have decided to be, not because it feels good in the moment. Consistency builds resilience. Each time you show up when it is inconvenient, you strengthen your ability to endure discomfort. Life rarely becomes easier, you simply become stronger. Consistency trains you to do what matters regardless of how you feel. That strength carries into every area of life, not just the habit you are practicing. Motivation often focuses on outcomes. Consistency focuses on process. When you are motivated, you think about results, timelines, and achievements. When you are consistent, you think about today. You ask what needs to be done now. This shift reduces pressure and increases sustainability. You stop being overwhelmed by the future and start being faithful in the present. Consistency also creates identity change. Motivation changes behavior temporarily. Consistency changes who you believe you are. When you show up day after day, you begin to see yourself as someone who follows through. That identity becomes self-reinforcing. You act consistently because it aligns with who you are becoming. One of the greatest benefits of consistency is that it lowers the cost of decision-making. When something is a consistent habit, it no longer requires debate. You do not negotiate with yourself every day. You simply act. This saves mental and emotional energy that can be used for growth rather than internal conflict. Consistency is especially powerful in spiritual life. Faith cannot be sustained on emotional highs alone. Worship, prayer, and trust must continue through doubt, fatigue, and unanswered questions. Consistency keeps faith alive when feelings are unstable. It anchors belief in practice rather than emotion. Motivation thrives on novelty. Consistency thrives on routine. Routines may feel boring, but they are effective. They create predictability in a chaotic world. When your spiritual and personal practices are rooted in routine, you are less vulnerable to distraction. You know where to return when life feels unsettled. Consistency also reveals priorities. What you do consistently is what you value most. You may say something matters, but consistency proves it. This honesty can be uncomfortable, but it is necessary for growth. When you see where consistency is lacking, you gain clarity about where decisions need to be strengthened. Motivation tends to exaggerate what you can do in a short time and minimize what can be done over a long time. Consistency does the opposite. It focuses on small actions repeated over time. Those actions compound into results that motivation alone could never sustain. Consistency also protects you from burnout. Motivation often pushes you too hard, too fast. You overextend, expecting quick results, and exhaust yourself. Consistency paces you. It allows for progress without overload. Sustainable growth is built on rhythms you can maintain, not bursts you cannot repeat. Another strength of consistency is that it builds trust. Others trust you when you are consistent. You trust yourself when you are consistent. Trust is foundational for leadership, relationships, and self-respect. Inconsistency erodes trust because it creates unpredictability. Consistency builds credibility because it proves reliability. Motivation is influenced by environment. A good message, a powerful song, or a meaningful moment can inspire you. But those influences fade. Consistency is built in ordinary environments. It does not require perfect conditions. It adapts to busy schedules, emotional fluctuations, and unexpected challenges. Consistency also shapes emotional health. When your actions are steady, your emotions become more stable. You are less reactive because your life is not constantly starting over. Progress, even slow progress, creates hope. Hope grows when you see yourself moving forward rather than repeatedly resetting. Consistency is often invisible. No one applauds daily faithfulness. No one celebrates routines that happen quietly. But what is invisible to others is visible to God and formative to you. Over time, consistency produces results that suddenly appear remarkable. Even though they were built through ordinary obedience, motivation is often fueled by external validation. Consistency is fueled by internal conviction. When applause fades, consistency remains. When recognition disappears, consistency continues. That independence from external affirmation creates freedom. You are no longer driven by approval, but guided by purpose. Consistency teaches patience. You learn to value progress over speed. You learn to trust the process. You learn to keep moving even when results are delayed. That patience strengthens character and prepares you for greater responsibility. In seasons of failure or setback, motivation often disappears completely. Consistency becomes even more important then. Consistency does not require perfection. It allows for mistakes and adjustments. You may stumble, but you return to the rhythm. That return is what keeps you moving forward. Consistency does not mean doing everything perfectly every day. It means refusing to quit. It means showing up again after you fall. It means choosing faithfulness over feelings. Over time, consistency outperforms talent, enthusiasm, and inspiration. The most significant changes in life rarely come from moments of intense motivation. They come from steady, repeated actions that align with purpose. When motivation fades, consistency carries you. When emotions fluctuate, consistency anchors you. When circumstances shift, consistency keeps you moving in the right direction. Consistency beats motivation every time because consistency works even when motivation is gone. Everything you've heard comes down to this simple truth: your life is being shaped right now, whether you are intentional or not. Daily focus is quietly pointing your destiny in a direction. Decisions are either being made by you or for you. Small disciplines are either building strength or allowing weakness to grow. Your thoughts are either training you toward faith or fear. Ordinary days are either being wasted or woven together by God into something extraordinary. Consistency is either carrying you forward or leaving you dependent on feelings that will never last. Nothing changes all at once, but everything changes one day at a time. You don't need a dramatic moment to transform your life. You need alignment. You need clarity. You need faithfulness in what feels small and unseen. The power of transformation is not found in waiting for motivation, perfect conditions, or sudden breakthroughs. It is found in choosing to show up, to focus intentionally, to decide courageously, to discipline yourself daily, to guard your thoughts, and to trust that God is working even when the days feel ordinary. When you live this way, growth becomes inevitable. Drift loses its grip. Distraction loses its power. Fear loses its voice. Over time, you become someone who is anchored rather than reactive, purposeful rather than passive, faithful rather than driven by emotion. This is how lives change. Not through hype, but through habit. Not through intensity, but through consistency. Not through one extraordinary moment, but through thousands of ordinary decisions made with faith